Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Men for the Win is sponsored by the Grand Group with Edina Realty. Are you looking to purchase a new home in the Twin Cities area? Or perhaps you're trying to sell your current home? Whether you're upsizing or downsizing, the Grand Group with Edina Realty will meet all of your housing needs. Contact the Grand Group by emailing thegran, that's G-R-A-N, group, at edinarealty.com, or call them by phone at 612-817-8751. The Grand Group with Edina Realty, 7-time Minneapolis-St. Paul Magazine Super Agent Award winners.
On this episode, David and Dan recap the Twins' 3-game series against the Atlanta Braves. Thanks for listening. Enjoy. Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win. My name is David Kufis. With me, as always, is Dan Thompson. The Twins continue their 9-game homestand just in terrible fashion, getting swept by the Atlanta Braves, miscues on the base paths, terrible decisions by Tommy Watkins, terrible starting pitching, terrible bullpen pitching, terrible management. Dan, this was a rough series to watch. I didn't enjoy almost any minutes of it. It was absolutely terrible. I feel bad. I'm upset. You're going to have to help me get back to a state of calm, Dan Thompson.
Well, it's going to be tough. I mean, like, remember in Apollo 13 when, like, they think the spaceship is falling apart and anyway, I'm sure there's something there. I can't even finish it, David. I'm too sad.
Ogres are like onions.
Well, it wouldn't be an episode of Men for the Win if Dan didn't start it off with a comparison or a movie reference. Congratulations, Dan.
Thank you. No, obviously a disappointing series. The Twins, they're still in a playoff position, I guess, but it feels less like a team that's going to be able to win a division, especially with the Royals taking 3 out of 4 from Cleveland and looking pretty good. But here's what I'll say. At the end of the day, they're just that. They are still a playoff team with a month to go, and that's exciting.
It was a weird series, Dan. I really thought that they should come away with at least one here. Game 1 was the most interesting just from a weather perspective, Dan.
Not a baseball perspective, but the weather was really fascinating.
I don't know who decided that this game should be started.
I knew exactly what to do, but in a much more real sense, I had no idea what to do.
I watch a lot of F1. Dan, right? And the weather is of
It wouldn't
vital
be an
importance.
episode of Men for the Win if David Kufis didn't bring up F1 in a totally nonsensical way.
No, listen, I didn't even get to say anything yet, Dan. I'm just saying that the weather in F1 is of vital importance, right?
Sure.
Because it determines what tires you're putting on the car and like how the cars are going to drive around the corners. I don't know the type of meteorologists that F1 has, but I know the type that the Twins have, Dan. None meteorologists here. I don't know who's in charge of calling the game or saying, hey, let's postpone this a little bit. An amateur, Dan, a guy with a telescope could have told you that the rain was coming.
With a telescope?
I don't understand how they...
A telescope?
A telescope.
Like a binoculars or something like that?
No, yeah,
like
a telescope. Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think a pirate, Dan, with one of those, the ones that collapse and whatnot. I think a pirate, Dan, from the lookout. What do they call that up there?
Red sky in the morning, sailor take warning. Red sky at night, sailor delight. I think that's the pirate's saying.
Is it red sky or orange sky?
Well, anyway.
The guy in the crow's nest, the guy in the crow's nest of a pirate ship.
The illustration
A guy in the crow's nest of the pirate ship, Dan, could have told you that rain was on the way.
They put it backward. Tell them to turn it around.
Anyway, I bring this up because I was watching the game on my phone at this point at a Chick-fil-A with my kids, and it just starts to pour, and it's super dark out, and my kids are having a great time in the play place, and I'm watching Bailey Ober just get shelled. And then I'm frantically searching the MLB rules database to figure out if there's a way that this game can be wiped off the map if it rains for long enough. No, not anymore. That was pre-COVID, not anymore. But then I got to thinking about Bailey Ober, Dan, and I got to think, that looks like a terrible time. That looks so not fun that you're out there on the mound just getting absolutely shelled. But then I started to think about Bailey Ober as a father. And I thought, he's got 4 kids. And if he was at Chick-fil-A right now, as opposed to on this mound getting absolutely shelled, would Bailey Ober rather pitch that inning again, the first inning against the Braves, and have the same exact results happen? Or would he rather be at Chick-fil-A in a raining downpour, unable to leave, and all 4 of his children are having a meltdown at the same time?
I'd probably take the meltdown at Chick-fil-A and not the meltdown at Target Field. That was pretty dreadful. I guess we should finally start talking about these games, so let's go to it.
Series recap.
The Twins lose game 1, 10-6. The score makes it look like they were close, but they really weren't. This weird rain delay. Ober on the mound, as we were just talking about, got absolutely shelled. 2 innings pitched, 7 hits, 9 earned runs, 2 walks, 2 strikeouts, and then 2 home runs here. This ends his streak of 11 straight quality starts. And Dan, I have to be honest, all I'm thinking the entire time the Braves are jumping on him, I'm thinking he's either injured or he's tipping his pitches again like he's done against the Royals.
I think it was also just super hot, right? I mean, like, maybe that was part of it. It was hot and humid. I mean, obviously the storms were coming.
Don't forget to bring a towel.
Yeah, all kinds of ominous symbolic signs going on, I think, at the beginning of game 1 here. Top of the first, he gives up 4 runs. Whit Merrifield hits singles. Jorge Soler walks. Marcell Ozuna singles. Matt Olson hits a home run in there. So it's 4-0. Now, the Twins did get a run in the bottom of the first, and so I thought maybe they can steady this ship.
Maybe, but not really, Dan. The Twins strike back with a Manny Margot double. He steals third, which is great because the Twins never steal third base. And then a Miranda sac fly, again, gives the Twins their first run of the evening. Top of the second, Ober's nightmare continues, Dan. I mean, if 2 kids were having a meltdown in the top of the first, the other 2 joined in the top of the second. But there's 2 outs in the second. You think that Ober's going to work through it, but no. Whit Merrifield doubles. Jorge Soler walks. Marcell Ozuna doubles. Matt Olson doubles. You would think I'm reading the same lines right now here, Dan. But no, I'm not. Then a Braves home run leads to this 9-1 score that's just, it's embarrassing, Dan. It's embarrassing baseball to watch.
Yeah, and then the rains come. And so we have a long rain delay. Obviously, Bailey Ober's not there. Crazy skies. The pictures that I saw out of Minneapolis were nuts.
We stopped on our way home because the rain sort of let up a little bit. We stopped and my wife got out of the car because it was an orange sky with a double rainbow. And it was the craziest thing I'd ever seen. And then what was so cool about it is you could see the blue skies, just a little bit further off to the horizon. And it was really neat to see. And the Twins, I'm sure they messed with the picture a little bit, but they couldn't have messed with it much. They got a picture of Target Field with the rainbow directly over it with the weird sky color. You have to find this picture, folks, because it's so cool looking.
Well, you mentioned the blue light after all of this. I mean, the Twins really kind of tried to come back in this baseball game. In the bottom of the 5th, they stringed together a Braves error with singles from Wallner, Martin, and Margot to score a couple runs, so it's 9-3. Now, granted, Trevor Richards came in after that.
That'll be the last time we're seeing Trevor Richards for this Twins team, Dan. We would have been better off not making any moves at the deadline, which is hard to say, Dan. When you make one move that should not be a move of consequence, it shouldn't lead to as many losses as Trevor Richards has led to for the Twins. But Orlando Arcia walks, Merrifield singles, and then Orlando Arcia scores on a wild pitch from Richards. It's his 7th with the Twins, and he now leads the league in wild pitches, and the Braves lead 10-3.
But the bottom of the 7th, the Twins aren't done. They load the bases with a Vasquez single, a Wallner hit by pitch, of course.
We're about to begin bonding adamantium to weapon exoskeleton.
Manny Margot singles. Royce Lewis does the only thing that he does now with the bases loaded. He hits a sac fly. And so it's 10-4. And then Miranda hits a deep fly ball to center. And this is crazy because not only is it like the exact same spot that he hit when against the Cardinals, it's also caught by a guy who has second at the end of his name, Michael Harris II. It's like the same catch where he's like leaping out. And it's really too bad because if that ends up being a hit, it's even closer. And dare we say the Twins weren't out of it?
Absolutely. I was thinking the same thing. Also, that stat that you just gave, that's very much an ESPN type stat where it's like Miranda's the only guy to have RBIs robbed from a center fielder with second at the end of their name in consecutive, series. Bottom
of the 8th, Kyle Farmer hits a solo home run, of course. And so it's 10-5. Some nice catches in the top of the 9th by Austin Martin and Matt Wallner to keep it at 5. Though I got to say, can we ever call Austin Martin's catches great? Because what he is great, Byron Buxton just makes routinely.
It's a fair criticism, certainly. I guess I'm saying great within the scale of Austin Martin catches, not within the scale of center field catches in general.
Fair enough. In the bottom of the 9th, Matt Wallner hits a solo home run, actually off of a lefty, and so it's 10-6. Good sign there. But the Braves do win this one 10-6. Whit Merrifield, remarkably, goes 5 for 5. He becomes the first player to have 1,000 career hits against the Twins, David. Did you know this?
That's not real.
That's not a real stat. I'm trying to, I guess I should have said 2,000 or something like that.
I'm like looking at this and I'm like,
no.
I'm like, I know he's older and he played for the Royals for a long time, but I'm like 1,000 hits. How is that even possible?
I'm not dead.
He did go 0 for 6 or something, or 0 for 5 in the second game. But in any case, game 2, it turns out to be a loss again. It's 8-6 Braves in 10 innings. We get a cool stat. This one was all over places. So Schwellenbach starts for the Braves. Woods Richardson starts for the Twins. It's the longest starting pitching matchup by name, length, I suppose, in baseball history. That's a baseball reference stat. But it's just another game, David, where the pitching struggled early and the bats came around too late.
I was at this game, Dan. I stayed to the end. I was with a buddy who's a Braves fan, which made it that much worse. What made it worse is that he was like, hey, I want to get on the road here. I'm going to watch the last out, but I'm going to make my way closer to the exit. And it's like the one time I could have been like excited and rubbing it in his face a little bit. He's not even sitting next to me.
Well, we should talk about this one a little bit. So the Braves score in the top of the second. Michael Harris the second homers off SWR. It's a 2-run shot, so it's 2-0 Braves. Twins get guys on base each of the first 6 innings, but don't score, and it's just maddening. Braves add 2 more in the top of the 5th on an RBI single by Marcell Ozuna off Alcala. Those runs end up going to SWR, who takes those and goes 4 2/3 innings, 3 hits, 3 walks, 4 earned runs, 3 Ks. How did he look live?
He looked fine, and he was upset when he got pulled. Like, he definitely wanted to finish the inning. And if there's one thing we've learned about the Twins bullpen, Dan, it's that if you give them runners on base, they will let those runners score every single time. It is bonkers to me how many inherited runners this team has given up. It's got to be an MLB record for all time, not just this season.
It's bad. And last year I thought they were actually pretty good about it. And, well, what was the name? Josh Staumont was really good for about a month and a half. And then, anyway. So Alcala, Bushley, Sands, and Jack after that pitched clean the rest of the way. So that allows the Twins to come back. It's in the bottom of the 7th when they finally do it. Castro singles, Larnach doubles, Wallner hits an RBI single, Julian doubles. He did something right.
As if he did something right.
Oh wait, I wanted it to go to my head.
No, he shouldn't, because this guy, we're going to talk about Julian later. So Wallner scores on that. Twins close it to 4-3, and then they finally do close the gap fully in the bottom of the 8th with a couple outs. Castro doubles. Larnach singles him in. He was really maybe the one Twin who was clutch all series here. And so it's tied at 4. And so we go to extras.
Top of the 10th, Duran comes in. My Braves friend turns to me and he says, I got to be honest, you guys kind of have a leg up here. Like, I think you guys can win this one here.
Kiss of death.
You got Duran coming in. He does his whole, fancy walk-in with the lights on and everything. And what does he do? Absolutely nothing, Dan. So Ozuna doubles to center field. Martin doesn't catch it. Buxton certainly would have. It was a weird read by Martin to begin with. The way that he jumped, he had to, jump and then reach his hand out to his right. He jumped straight up and then had to reach to his right, which is telling you that he's not seeing the ball well. But what was so funny about this play, Dan, is that the Braves hold the runner and he doesn't score. He should have scored. He should have been in the dugout drinking Gatorade by the time that Austin Martin gets this ball in. But no, he's sitting at third base. So it's still a tie game. So now you have infield in. I know you love it, Dan.
I love it.
So Matt Olson grounds the ball to Julian. And Julian throws, and he throws the ball as if Hakeem Olajuwon is playing catcher for the Twins, because there is no chance to get the runner coming home. And granted, it was going to be a close play anyway, but if the throw was on target where the ball should be, that's an out, and this game looks completely different.
It does, but instead the run scores. So then the Braves still have a couple guys on, and then they add 3 more in the inning, and so it's 8-4 going into the bottom of the 10th. The Twins get 2 quick outs, but then somehow they end up bringing the go-ahead run to the plate later here. Matt Wallner, of all guys, I mean, this could have been his crowning moment, but he strikes out. And so it's 8-6. And so the Twins lose this one. They struck out 14 times. It felt like a lot of them with runners on base. This is their most strikeouts in a game since April 23rd. It's been a long time since the White Sox, one shy of their season high of 15, which they did twice before that back in April.
April was a rough month.
It was.
We got to remember.
Well, you know what? Late August is turning out to be a pretty rough month here too, David. So
it's not good. Months with A. It's not good, Dan. I will say, there was a moment in that bottom of the 10th where I thought this would be remarkable. Mm-hmm. Like I was just so fixated, and it was very much like the game that you and I were at, where they almost came back against Houston, and then the other game I was at with my buddy against the Rays, where they almost came back in that one too. The Twins have come so close to coming back from just crazy scores. It's remarkable that they haven't managed to pull one of these out.
No, because game 1, it even had that feeling for a while too. But we get to game 3. The Braves win this 5-1. Festa is really very good in this game. I think this was pretty clearly his best start. 6 innings, 2 hits, 2 earned runs, 7 Ks, just the 1 home run, and then a run later we're going to talk about. That run comes in the top of the first on a Jorge Soler home run, so it's 1-0 then. But after that, I mean, the Twins kind of hang around, and Festa keeps the Braves quiet.
Yeah, bottom of the third, though, Matt Wallner hits a ball off of Sale's face, but he stays in the game, and I can't figure out if he's actually going to be hurt or not, because it hits him like in the jaw, and it doesn't look like the ball is deflected at all. But he stays in the game, which, here's the thing, you don't want to see a guy get injured.
No.
At the same time, you're kind of like,
no, you can't at the same time.
No, well, you can sort of, no, you can. It'd be just like, if Chris Sale got lifted because, he was having tummy troubles, right? That's all I'm thinking. I'm not saying that I want him to get injured. I'm just saying in that particular instance, it would not have been the worst thing for him to leave the ball game.
That's, all right, that's terrible. When
because you're thinking the same
thing.
That's not exactly you're like, I don't want to see a guy get injured, but I wouldn't have minded if Sale left in the third. How about this? His wife had a baby, and he had to get to the hospital to meet the kid, so he left in the third. That's like a happy reason.
Yeah, that's much better than he got hit in the face with a baseball. What is with you and people getting hit in the face? You have no patience, no love for people in those situations. Kyle Farmer, now Chris Sale.
Oh, man. Anyway, bottom of the fourth, the Twins squander some chances here. They have second and third with no out, and then the bases loaded with one out, and they get nothing because they're terrible at baseball. The bottom of the sixth end gave the Twins another opportunity. They do end up scoring a run on a Castro single, but we're going to talk about sort of what led to that a little bit later. Top of the seventh, though, things just fall apart. Ozuna walks. Festa leaves, which we're going to talk about that later, too. Thielbar, Dan, which is maybe my new favorite phrase. I appreciate you coming up with that one. But so, Thielbar, by giving up a double to Matt Olson, followed by a single to Ramon Laureano, and then Alcala can't mop it up, and he allows an Orlando Arcia single, and then a Luke Williams double to Margot, which, how on earth this has scored a double is absolutely beyond me. Margot misplays the ball, bounces off his glove, and so the Braves get 4, and now they lead at 5-1. Honestly, I think it is possible that Max Kepler is leading some sort of dance practice in the clubhouse between Eddie Julian literally pirouetting out of the way of a line drive and Manny Margot taking it upon himself to do a full twirl before trying to catch this ball in left field.
I know.
There has to be some explanation, Dan. Can you imagine, Dan, the ignorance that we had at the beginning of the season? Remember when the Twins front office was telling us how we got Manny Margot, we have security in center field for when Buxton goes down with injury, and we're like, yes, great. He showed up to camp in a really quick turnaround time. Why are we praising him for that, Dan?
I don't
understand. How was the guy? We should have figured this out way earlier in the season, Dan. It took us until like July to figure out that Manny Margot cannot play in the outfield. He's a bad outfielder. How did it take us that long to realize that, maybe they weren't being truthful, that he can play center field when Buxton gets injured?
Yeah.
I don't understand. Morons. We are morons, Dan. We should have been angry about this when it happened. And now Michael A. Taylor's on the market, and people are saying, let's pick him up and let Margot go. It doesn't even matter. Michael A. Taylor could do nothing. He could never swing at a pitch, and I'd rather have him on this team than Manny Margot. And he went 3 for 5 in one of these games. I don't even care, Dan. I'm so upset.
Fans want an ejection. There he goes. And that was Gardy's gripe.
It had to happen at some point here. By the way, I think we were just blinded by his promptness. I appreciate a prompt person, right?
Blinded by promptness?
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. Anyway.
Dan would show up and get sentenced to jail, but he'd be so thrilled that the judge showed up on time.
Oh, it's just nice when people are there when you expect them to be. I guess that's my point.
Ogres are like onions. End of story.
All right, let's go on here to the Puckett's Picks winner segment.
Catch 'em all, Kirby Puckett.
Puckett's Picks winner.
So I notice here that you didn't use the scoring that I put in, David, because I gave Brooks Lee his points for being in St. Paul, and he ended up with 4, which I think is respectable. Now, it still wouldn't have won, so Hogs picked Wallner, who had 9. He also got him the bonus point for the team high. You picked Larnach, who had 5. Royce Lewis had -4. We're going to talk more about him later. But this is my question to you. How cheap are the Pohlads that they can't spring for a ticket from Omaha to MSP on like a Monday or Tuesday? It's not like this would be, you're not going to pay prime fares at this hour.
I don't imagine that was the reason, Dan.
I think it was. Why? Why else would you leave Eddie Julian on this roster? Because I get the Saints are in Omaha, and apparently that's too expensive. There's got to be like 3 or 4 flights a day between Omaha and Minneapolis, surely.
It is hard to understand exactly why you wouldn't bring Lee up, especially knowing second base is just a graveyard at this point. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. But so season standings here, Dan. I'm still in the lead, thank goodness, with 21.5. Hoag's now still catching up, but I think he's just about done at 14.5. The listeners have 10. And Dan, you have 8. And I think at this point, you should just be hoping to get into double digits by the time the season ends.
Just 2 more wins. That's all I need. Let's move forward here to Beast versus Bench.
Beast versus Bench.
Is losing fun? Is losing fun?
I'm going to give this to David Festa for his courage, right? For facing this Braves lineup and going out there and being awesome. I mean, he looked really effective. I was so happy that he got to be out there for 6 full innings because he looked really good.
For his courage, Dan?
Wait, yeah.
Like I guess was the other option that he would just cower in the clubhouse and refuse to go. No, Rocco, I don't want to go.
All right. For his fortitude, for his flourish. I don't know. Maybe I could have made it alliterative.
How about he pitched really well against a pretty good lineup, Dan? How about just that?
All right, that's fine. Yeah. Well, I'm going to do my bench too. So then I'm going to give it to Royce Lewis for his lack of heroism here because he's 0 for 9 with 5 strikeouts. He had one ball, I think it was in game 2, that it looked like he might have nearly hit a home run. It was a really sharp fly ball down the left field line. But other than that, Royce Lewis was very nothing.
You were the chosen one.
This was a rough one for Royce Lewis, and he came up in so many moments, Dan. There were so many chances for Royce Lewis to win baseball games for the Twins, and he did absolutely nothing. And this is philosophical for a moment here.
Sure.
How much of it do you think is that like Correa and Buxton aren't there and Lewis doesn't have their energy to feed off of?
Yeah, it's like, what's the 3-headed Hydra creature in Harry Potter or something like that, or the 3-headed dog? You know, like if you cut off 2 of the heads, it's just one dog.
Ogres are like onions.
That's a good one. That's apt for this comparison.
You know, I will say the ogre metaphor that Shrek uses isn't a bad metaphor, Dan.
No,
That's not the issue here. I mean, some of your metaphors are terrible, but yes, this one in this instance is not bad. By the way, this whole like courage and
Cerberus,
lack of
by
heroism.
the way, Cerberus is the name of the 3-headed dog. I wanted to get that right.
Wonderful. It's very Wizard of Oz of you, Dan. Like
Thank
it just
you.
feels very, yeah. But anyway, I don't know, Dan. I looked at these box scores for a long time. I was at game 2. I was furious. I drove home alone, and I really don't like driving home alone after a Twins loss when I was at the stadium because I'm so mad. I'm just upset, and I can't focus on the great conversation I had when I was there with whoever I was there with. We can't, be joking and laughing even though the Twins lost. So all I'm doing is I'm listening to Chris Atterbury talk to me about how this game was terrible. And so I'm just getting more and more upset as I'm driving home, Dan, and I hate it. So now I'm looking at these box scores again, and I'm getting even more upset. I'm reliving all these terrible memories of game 2. So for every good play that someone made, Dan, they made a poor one, except for Festa, who should have been allowed to pitch the 7th inning. Don't get me started on that quite yet. And the fact that he wasn't was ridiculous. Okay, I guess I'm already starting here.
Yeah,
but so I'm not going to give the beast to anybody because Festa's the only one who deserves it. For my bench, Dan, take your pick. Honestly, throw a dart. It doesn't even matter. Ober, SWR, Thielbar, Duran, Eddie, Julian, Manny Margot. Give it to the entirety of the team, Dan. And I was thinking about this. The Twins would be better off allowing their position players to pitch as opposed to their bullpen. And I wonder if the MLB would make an exception and allow the Twins to do this because it's truly the right decision for the team at this point. Like, they are trying to win baseball games to the best of their ability, Dan. And at this point, the way to do that is to allow anybody but their bullpen to pitch.
Yeah, it does seem like the rule book is really tying Rocco's hands here, I think, when it comes to bullpen management.
What a weight Rocco must have felt then when they tied it at 4-4. No longer could he manage from behind to lose. He had to manage to try and win the game. It was baffling, Dan. Did you see that? His fingers were twitching. He was having a real hard time.
All right, well, let's go on here to his segment.
Rocco's Rewind.
Dan, why is Kyle Farmer not taking the place of Eddie Julian in game 2 as a defensive replacement? Kyle Farmer has like 2 legitimate roles on this team. One of them is to be a clubhouse guy, the veteran presence in the clubhouse, to help the guys who are struggling and introduce the rookies to the league. But no, Dan, his other legitimate role, Dan, is a defensive replacement at second base because Eddie Julian has no idea how to field the position. What are you doing, Rocco? It's the one time it makes sense for Kyle Farmer to get in this game.
His management lately of the defense has been strange, and maybe partially because Kepler's been, hurt but not available and not on the IL, something going on with him there, which kind of relates to my point about Manny Margot. what do you do with him? You know, like, I get that Rocco has to put him somewhere because Kepler isn't available, but to your point, I mean, maybe Caleb Thielbar is a heck of a left fielder. You know, like, have they considered that? Maybe they could just do a roster positional swap with Caleb Thielbar and Manny Margot.
Can you imagine Rocco bringing the scorecard to the ump and being like, well, here's our lineup. Yeah, I realize it's a little off the wall, but we're going to try something a little different. No, I got another one, though, Dan. Game 3, bottom 7. If Alcala is coming in anyway, why on earth are you bothering with Thielbar at all? I don't care righty-lefty. I do not care righty-lefty because Caleb Thielbar is not good at baseball right now, Dan.
No, he's not. And it's a shame. You want him to be doing well. He has a strangely long leash. You know, for as many bullpen arms as have been cut loose lately from the ship, Caleb Thielbar is still there. It's weird.
Minnesota moment.
So I'm going to talk about briefly here the rally in Game 2, bottom 7, where they scored some runs, and it matches up with what you were saying earlier about how they have shown some pluck late in games to be able to get back in them. It's just that is not enough when your bullpen cannot hold a lead.
No, you have to do more, and like especially when your starter actually gives you a few solid innings.
Yes.
Do something. But yeah, they just could not get it done. I'm going to go with Game 3, bottom 6, and this is Watkins sending Margot.
Ugh.
So Margot leads off with a double. No outs. Then Jeffers singles to right. And Tommy sends Margot, and he's thrown out by like 10 feet. And this is what I don't understand about Tommy Watkins. First of all,
Please attempt to be a gentleman.
Margot is slowing down because he's not expecting to be sent home. So he stutters a little bit around third base. Even if he doesn't stutter, Dan, he's thrown out by 8 feet as opposed to 10 feet.
Sure.
Like, it's not going to be close. First and third with no outs versus first with 1 out, Dan. I think that's a no-brainer in a game that I just can't imagine, knowing how this bullpen has pitched, that you're going to win this game 2-1. Like, I think you got to keep the guy at third there. And Watkins, this is just a situation where you're not trying to win it with 1 run. You're going to need more than that 1 run. So sending him there it's just not worth it, Dan.
No, and Solaire's got a pretty good arm. You know, you can't assume that your team isn't going to get hits later with guys in scoring position. You can't recklessly send somebody like that. I thought that was a very bad choice.
Really frustrating. I used up all my anger earlier. I thought I was kind of going to go off on Watkins a little bit, but at this point, I think it's probably more hurtful if I just say I'm disappointed. You know, I'm not even upset. I'm just disappointed.
It's the cows.
Yeah, it's like, you know, when your daughter spills the milk, you know, like you're just disappointment works better than anger there. Let's go on here. Mauer's musings.
I just don't know how it can get any better.
Mauer's musings.
I'll start. Biggest concern with 1 month to go, David.
How long do you have?
No, I want one thing. I want you to distill this down to just the one thing you think is the biggest issue facing this team.
Inability to close out ball games, Dan.
I agree with you. And I realize that I'm standing on the same sturdy ground that I've been standing on here. I think these rookie pitchers are going to be okay. Rocco reiterated that they don't have a short leash here, and I think he indicated that with Festa going 6 innings this game. I do think that their starting pitching is going to be enough, but they've got to get the relief pitchers. I would be more concerned about the lineup, except for the fact that we know that they will get Buxton and Cray back here at some point. They will get Brooks Lee back at some point, but I am worried about that bullpen.
I was quite frustrated that he pulled Festa after he gave up that walk in the 7th for Thielbar. Again, had he gone straight to Alcala, I would have been less upset about it. And like, you know, who knows what happens? I mean, maybe Alcala comes in and he manages to pitch a clean inning. But I hate that he went to Thielbar there, and I would have much rather seen Festa pitch tired in the 7th as opposed to bringing in Thielbar in that moment.
All right, what's your question?
So my real question is, how many games do you think the Twins can afford to lose and still make the postseason? So right now, the wild card standings are fascinating, Dan. So the Boston Red Sox are 3 games back from the Twins. The Seattle Mariners are 4.5 back, tied with another team we're going to talk about in a few minutes here.
Yeah, I can see that, yeah.
But so this is what the Twins have left on their schedule. They see the Blue Jays for 3, the Rays for 4, the Royals for 3, the Angels for 3, the Reds for 3, the Guardians for 4, the Red Sox for 3, the Marlins for 3, and the Orioles for 3 to close out the season. Of those teams, Dan, if you take out the AL Central teams, which obviously those are going to be the biggest series left on the schedule, the only team that the Twins see that's still a postseason team is the Orioles to close out the season. And there's a real good chance that that series is going to matter to the Twins as well as to the Orioles. If you look at the Guardians, and again, you're taking out the AL Central matchups, they see 5 teams that are non-playoff teams, but then they have to see the Dodgers and they have to see the Astros. So that bodes well for the Twins. Their schedules are pretty comparable. I would say the Twins still have an easier schedule the rest of the way. Now we get to the Royals, and the Royals are fascinating, Dan, because they have a rough stretch of games right here. They go 4 against the Astros, 3 against the Guardians, 3 against the Twins, 3 against the Yankees. Then they see some garbage, Dan. Then they see some teams that haven't been competitive since the first week of the season, and then they finish the season with 3 against the Braves. This is going to be a close race, Dan, likely to the last week of the season. So how many games then, Dan, out of the last 29 games that the Twins have, knowing this is what the Guardians and the Royals are facing, how many can they afford to lose?
I think they can go 15-14 and still be pretty safe in the playoffs, right? Because then you're assuming that one of those teams behind them is going to have to, get 20 wins essentially the rest of the way. And I don't really see that happening with that way. I would feel okay with 15-14, and I do think that they can get there. It's just kind of the question to me as well, to what end after that?
Yeah, I think that the Blue Jays and the Rays series, they have to take like 6 of 7 to right the ship here, Dan, because the rest of the way it gets a little bit dicier.
All right, well, let's look back at the series one last time in the series grade.
Series grades.
It's an F, and it can be nothing else, Dan. This was abysmal. I'm still upset about all of the games. I'm upset about all of the decisions. I'm just upset about everything, Dan. It's an F. I don't really want to say anything else about it.
Yeah, I haven't given a lot of these, but 0 out of 10 on the advanced retreats. I did say 6 out of 10 on the well-played baseball because, well, even that feels a little high. But the starting pitching aside, well, no, it's got to be lower. I can't even do that. I think I'm going to call it a 3 out of 10 after naming all those things. So that is an F, obviously. I also need to correct my math from the last one. I said that 13 out of 20 was like a C-. That's actually a D. So, yes, I thought worse of them in the last series as well than I thought I did.
So what was the grade for this series? Now I feel like I got a little confused.
Yeah, 3 out of 20.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an F. Yep.
I love the advanced retreat is a 0, Dan. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
But let's look around the league here in Herbie's headlines.
I don't know, Jack. It looked like Herbeck pulled him off the bag.
Herbie's headlines.
Now, I mentioned this a minute ago, Dan. I keep talking about this Tigers team. And a while back, Dan, they were 9 games back in the wild card race. And I told you at that time, if the Twins were 9 games back at that moment, I would have still held out hope.
Yes.
Right? Like, it's a very different feeling when you're talking about a team that's already in the playoff hunt as opposed to a team that's kind of out of it. But if I were a Tigers fan, Dan, and I was listening to this Twins podcast for some reason, I would be like, thank you so much, David, because the Tigers, Dan, every time we record, they get a little closer. And they get a little closer. And they get a little closer. And wouldn't you know, Dan, the Tigers are only 4.5 back from the 3rd wild card spot.
I know. I'm surprised you didn't add them here to that very long list you gave of the Guardians and the Royals schedules. They only play the Royals. They have one series there. They don't play the Guardians or the Twins. I'm still feeling pretty good that I'm not having to buy your trip to Essen, Germany. So we'll see.
It's happening, Dan. Then the other note here, Dan. Ohtani's dog brings the first pitch ball out to the mound. And do you know what Ohtani's dog's name is, Dan?
It's Decoy, which is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's funny, Dan, because that's also the nickname that Ohtani gave his interpreter. It's just shocking. Oh, man.
What are the odds of that? He's so innocent and naive to not make the connection there between the two.
Oh, man, Dan. Those people who are still out there saying, oh, no way he placed any bets. You're full of it. Get over yourself.
Me and Hogs, we're up there. Yeah. A federal investigation, David, cleared him.
My goodness. Again, it's more tinfoil to believe he didn't place bets than to believe he did. No question in my mind. Let's keep going here. Puckett's picks for the upcoming Blue Jays series.
And we'll see you tomorrow night.
Puckett's picks.
The listeners are going to go away from Lewis, which isn't shocking because it's been a rough one for Royce here. They're going to take Matt Wallner. Then it goes to Dan.
Yeah, I'm going to mix it up here. I'm going with Miranda.
I am not throwing away my shot.
I think that he has to turn it around eventually here. And I don't think this is the same as it was with Carlos Correa for me last season where I just kept holding out hope. I'm going to go with Carlos Santana. And then Hogs is still a believer. So he's going to take Royce Lewis off the board.
I mean, somebody had to pick him, right? I mean, how bad do we think the Twins are right now that nobody would pick Royce Lewis? But Hogs texted his pick, and it was even like a question mark. Like, I guess I'll take Lewis? Like, if nobody else is going to take him?
Seems like the right approach here, Dan. Well, I'm going to go ahead and send us out. Well, folks, if you like what you hear, please tell a friend. You can follow us on X at Men for the Win and find our Men for the Win Facebook and Instagram pages. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform so that you're notified when new episodes are available. And if you could leave us a rating or a like, we'd greatly appreciate it. If you'd like to support the show further, you can find us on Patreon. Link in the description. Thanks for listening, and as always, go Twins.
That'll wrap up another episode of Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kuvas and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Thanks so much for listening, and as always, go Twins.